Good day, gentle readers and fellow earthlings. Today is another episode of Logos 2000, 21st Century Foundations. With regards to that, it's largely a discovery of a discourse with regards to all the prior times was arrived at the great store of wisdom and knowledge about truth. Absolutely. That is with regards to the ideas that are profound for technical reasoning and logic and philosophy, have made for a framework and an edifice, and something we can intend to assent. Thus, in the course of matters of logic and reasoning, there can be arrived at these profound concepts like axiomless natural deduction for a theory for itself and on its own grounds, the truth of things to exist for a briefest, merest metaphysics, the silver thread as it's called, and then also to arrive at things like geometry and even underneath Euclidean geometry, to arrive at Euclidean geometry from lesser principles. Similarly, with these sorts of deconstructive accounts of arithmetic, then to arrive at these things from continuity and infinity as first for the numbers and the spaces. And then for our phenomenological intersubjective approach, to be able to have it all and to attain to that greater truth, all the things, of course, that go into logical positivism, and with regards to the theory and the philosophy of science and science and statistics, their very natures as reproducible, observable, and falsifiable, and as with regards to the invalidation of the null hypothesis for the statistical hypothesis, that what it's arrived at is both a stronger logical positivism that is as enabled by a stronger mathematical Platonism that's arrived at from fundamental questions of metaphysics that are allowed an answer. So that's kind of considered the course of these things. And from the perspective then of somebody who wants to have a theory that's true and intersubjective and interobjective, then how that can be arrived at, mostly because geometry gets built up after a spiral space filling curve and a universal vortex of a sort, just from points and spaces, just from nothing and being. And then, for example, as like Hegel gives, is the great monument of a Greek, then German idealism, has it after Aristotle, that the idea here is that there's a lot to it. And then today's modern logical positivist accounts, which had to kind of start over with the idea being that it's sensible, fungible, and tractable with minimal means and minimal attachments, that later this greater ontological commitment arrives at not having to have much burden to it at all, because there's something to be arrived at. And then, of course, here in these talks, there's a usual diatribe against half-truths, or what arrives from the inductive accounts that may not justify themselves and may not complete themselves, yet may serve as, well, good checks with regards to things that are expected for plain inductive accounts. That's a greater, wider, fuller dialectic is arrived at, and it's considered necessary. It's considered a given, and these kinds of things. So today what I'm going to do is look through some books, and there are many languages in the world, and so my native tongue is English, and I feel like I have a very, very good command of it, and it's appreciated as the lingua angla in around the world, and it's English. And then in other matters of these studies, a lot of times the works being the classics of the languages, and those is usually considered Greek, Latin, and sometimes Hebrew. So Greek, Latin, and sometimes Hebrew are considered the classics of the languages. Then as well, Arabic has a great recourse in store, most of which is that was arrived at after the Islamic Enlightenment was translated to Latin, say. So then before that, there's Greek and Aramaic and this and that. From the Sanskrit over from the Indic traditions and what makes Indo-European, the family of languages, as it were, and then as with regards to also the symbols and languages of the Far East, or the Orient sometimes, as it's put, Japanese and Chinese and Korean, and the many dialects and these things, like, for example, with regards to Cantonese and Mandarin or something like that. Here most of the terms are kind of from the Indo-European, and there's also as well that everything today is in English, and then the loan words or the origin words here, like logos, are these ones that have come down since forever, and so then these are kind of the things that we look to today. Most of the most ancient words in the world are the name of personages of the representations by stars in the sky, from the sky survey, that even from the antediluvian times, there are the same names for a wide variety of things on both sides of the Atlantic. So it's yet kind of just part of our world languages. So French and German have that. These are from France and Germany, and what it is intended to be described here is that for quite a while, French was the lingua franca around the world, and so many such matters of patois and pidgin are kind of related to French, German, and English and Dutch a little bit. But Dutch is and the Slavonic languages are not so necessarily attached as with regards to the Romance languages and the Teutonic tongues. So here for French and German, what I just wanted to comment is that as with regards to German idealism and science, or Göttingen and the surrounds of that, then a lot of course, the Greek idealism was written at that, and words like sein and nikta for being and nothing kind of arrived from German. And then for French, much of science and mathematics is for hundreds of years was in French. And so if there are three languages to learn with regards to these days studying these tracks, well, it's English, and then there's among the other kind of main languages is relevant, like Greek and Latin, which I don't very much speak, although all of our etymology in the Romance languages comes of a rise from that. And English is like about a half Romance language, meaning it's kind of from Italian, Romani, Spanish, French, and Latiners after that. And then Sanskrit, of course, is its own center of these cultural roots of these things, vis-a-vis Farsi, or there's so many languages in the world which things are written in. So then French is relevant because a lot of terms come from it, science comes from it. And so basically what I schooled in it all was English and French and German. And then picking up words and roots from Greek and Latin is almost always fruitful, useful, relevant, and the same. Of the etymology, the roots of the words, as with regards to that study of language and linguistics for all these things. So today I'm going to exercise my poor rusty French en français a bit and see what I might be able to read from Montaigne a little bit, and then as I'll probably suffer and what's the word? Fall from that, then I'll try and figure this out. But I just have these Montaigne essays, and so he with a preface to André Gide, a preface by André Gide, this folio classique edition of Montaigne essays has got two editions: Essais et Essais 2, Essais 1, Essais 2, Essais 2, and it's been a long time since like 1066 and the French and English, and insofar as that's a long time since like year zero and the Romans in English with regards to English in Francais. But in the preface, this is from Editions 1965 or 65, pour l'établissement du texte, la présentation et l'annotation. For the establishment of the text, the presentation, and the annotation. And in 1962, 62, pour la préface de André Gide. So to begin, before Montaigne begins, here's kind of a description from the back cover. C'est ici un livre de bon foi lecture. Here's a good little book, reader. Il t'avertise to you dès l'entrée from the beginning que je ne me suis proposé aucun fin. I have proposed nothing less than que domestique et privé to make and to own. Je veux qu'on me voie en ma façon simple. I want you to read in a simple language, natural et ordinaire, sans contention et artifice, and these, you notice, are the same words pretty much. Car c'est moi que je peins, that this is what I've tried to do. Mais de force, si le rend au vif, and here my skills demonstrate they're lacking, they will be read, et ma forme naïve, autant que la révérence publique l'a permis. Que si j'eusse été entre ces nations qu'on dit vivre encore sous la douce liberté des premières lois de nature, j'étais sûr que je m'y fusse très volontiers peint tout entier et tout nu. So this goes to entail that he's talking about a time when the state of things was beginning to see the Enlightenment with regards to the individual rights. And so here it's also as with regards to the intersubjective and the rights to reason, and also that a conscientious mathematician cannot ignore any mathematical fact. They're all mathematical facts. It's totally egalitarian in that sense, equal. So it's at a time when they had something like the French Revolution, which is a struggle and a conflict, is with regards to relieving the pressures. The pressures build, and then they must somehow relieve. And this is usually like for matters of being a doctor to stop the bleeding and relieve the pressure and these kinds of things. And so in the time then, what became some of these great works like Montaigne, and then later Locke and Rousseau, was also like America, the United States of America, and the Bill of Rights was associated with it. Because Locke and Montesquieu, after Montaigne, had also built a lot of these things that intend to entail as part of philosophy that it's each person's own responsibility to make for themselves their own thinking being, and that we're all feeling beings. And so then for like the whole egalite, fraternité, and liberté bit is deemed the most sort of reciprocal, and according to the golden rule, and according to a kind of an abstract, trade places randomly with anybody. Is that the system of government you want? That it would be so? That seems to be the fairest deal. Otherwise, that there's also as well the entire flip side of the pragmatist saying, it's like I don't know that anybody else wouldn't take that prisoner's dilemma, they call it sometimes, where two parties are set against each other, and so whether or not they one or the other or both damn each other to penury or death. Then the other idea is whether they don't, whether there's cooperation. So many of these concepts that arrive from the analysis of systems of government that are based on equality, like in any one of them, have that these are the kinds of ideas like the tragedy of the commons, which is that somebody's gonna abuse it, so then you just can't have it. And the prisoner's dilemma, which is just arbitrarily whether two people would betray each other or not. That it's otherwise given that before that everything was just ordained and by the order of birth, that everything is like that was the laws, and so then after this time, then there was a great amount an account from the most reasoned traditions to give then to every man and woman and child, every individual, their individual account of rights and responsibilities. Rights. Dans la plupart des auteurs, je vois l'homme qui écrit. Dans Montaigne, je vois l'homme qui pense. So Montesquieu, he says Montaigne is a good thinker. So these books are written in French. And looking here to this essay one, I'll look to the table of contents. And he talks about Pilate and le humain condition. So the human condition is le humain condition. The bête humaine bit is related to, is sometimes attributed to Émile Zola, who is one of the great French romanticist authors of the 1800s. And Émile Zola is great. So, I mean, if you want to read some French, it's relevant to read Stendhal and Émile Zola, and it's kind of in like the time of Goethe and stuff like that. That I really like Stendhal and Germinal and stuff like that. Cette public declaration m'oblige, this public declaration obliges me to hold to my route, and in a desmentir, and to not disfigure the image of my conditions. Si naturel qu'il soit, if it's so natural, where before again that we it so shows itself, il se voit, il s'est intentionnel fabrique. So it's tantamount in a sense to what's made. Et puis, puisque me faut faire tout entier, il n'y a pas un mois, just a month ago, qu'on me surprint, ignorant de quoi le vin savoir faire du pain. He was out of bread. Allons donc, il n'en éprouve aucun, tout au contraire. Il s'en amuse, il s'y complaît. Il s'est dit une fois pour toutes. Je ne sais rien, je ne saurais rien, je demeure inapte à savoir. Il approuve. So he just says that there's like a nihilistic account in a sense. And at the same time, it reflects one of the aspects of French culture, which is just like, you know, the aplomb, say, of it. Il n'est description pareille en difficulté à la description de soi-même, ni certaine utilité. Lisons-nous dans les Essais, Montaigne. This is something that Guedes is quoting Montaigne. En qui l'on se plaît trop souvent à ne voir qu'un égoïste et soucieux de bien public. The socio, or the society. Du texte, du reste formant, two texts of perfect form, inconciliable, encore que quelques lignes seulement le séparant dans la première chapitre du troisième livre nous les entendons suffisamment, néanmoins, combien Montaigne était peu fait par la direction des affaires et comme quoi, lorsqu'il résigna ses fonctions de magistrat, puis de même plus tard quitta la mairie de Bordeaux pour ne s'occuper plus que de lui-même. Il juguait fort sainement qu'en élaborant ses essais, il rendrait plus grand service à l'État. Now, I'm able to just kind of read off this from having some understanding of the pronunciation of the words. Not very great by any means, and by no means do I have any kind of fair accent en français. But it's something that's yet to remain. That this kind of action is just to reflect that there's a reading here made, and he discusses, for example, Boétius, La Boétie, and some other of the great thinkers that arrived at this Essais La Boétie, that would provide with regards to Boétie and the evangelical, in a sense, how he's ascribing that this also relates to the religious culture of the times, which is not so much necessarily relevant in our technical philosophy. It's just given as a given ungiven and this kind of thing. That it's yet a thing. Montaigne, alors même qu'il affirme, reste si divers. Montaigne addresses many things, one can nuance the infinite, the infinite all that he comes to read or say. Rechercher par exemple à travers les essais passages pour prendre la vertu, il trouve des couleurs tout autres. So this reflects on more of the reasons why I want to look into Montaigne, Montagne, for the technical reasoning, is because of such mentions as of the infinite. So, and for continuity. Socrates. Essays. An essay is a French word, and it means to try, to attempt, to make a course, and so it means in it's after the word essay, the verb essayer, or that being the infinitive, to try, and so in English, an essay means a written work, like this is a written or spoken essay. And it means a treatise, an opus, an act of fate in text, as according to words, and what it means to make an essay. And so it usually means a study and of the briefer form, vis-a-vis like a grand work or grander work. Then an essay can range from the brief to the extended. La vie d'un honnête homme is how Montaigne begins, the life of an honest man. There's a story about this guy. His name is Diogenes. Way back in the Greek days, he was a little eccentric, but he had a great thing for honesty. And people, one day he took a lantern and a lit lamp or a lantern during the day. It's like, well, why do you need a solar powered flashlight? Or back in the day when these things didn't have batteries and would only work in the light, you know. Or what's the whole use of screen doors on submarines or something like that. But anyways, Diogenes walked around with his lantern during the day. And the people's, where he was, I think it was Athens or something, I'm not positive about that, said, Diogenes, what's the deal here? He's like, I'm looking for an honest man. And it's like, okay, and it's like, so he kind of was looking for like this sort of supreme sort of honesty. So here we just kind of relate honesty to mathematical conscientiousness, because for the technical philosophy, and it's a logical philosophy, and so it's also logical conscientiousness. To be a conscientious mathematician and conscientious logician is for rigor and formality and such means of acceptability, and then for truth overall, that it's not involved the deception or the duplicitous and these kinds of things. So then for Montaigne to start off with, he's like, this is just an account of the la vie d'un honnête homme, an honest man. Is the title of his essay. So let's see what this has in it briefly. And I won't spend too much more time on trying to get into this today, but it helps to reflect when trying to delve into a culture that it has an entirely different language and help to relate things. That for a universal or world sort of history approach, it's a usual thing. In 1530, influenced by the humanist Guillaume Baudet, Francois I founded the Royal College for the lectures, the readers. Lecteurs are the readers here. That's basically my role in these talks is kind of just as a reader, but as well I kind of extemporize. So for the readers, enseignement de grec et l'hébreu, reading Greek and Hebrew, and at the same time in Latin. In 1532, Rabelais published in Lyon of the first of these romans or works, Pantagruel. Thus Montaigne found his beginning in the life of a simple triumph of humanism. So humanism is a couple different things, because it's kind of viewed from humanism that it's for the enlightenment and empowerment of the human reasoning. So this is long before, say, Nietzsche or something like that, who was left off after it was like cast down, metaphysics and this kind of thing, and that kind of course of things. When people could turn to this humanism overall long before that is a thing. But then if there's one side of it is that humanism is somehow that is selective, and so the human is kind of like their genus and species in the taxonomy of the cladistics of the phylogeny of the phyla and after the kingdoms of the great ontology that is the animal, mineral, vegetable, and fungi kingdoms of all the things is same. Homo means same. And so Homo sapiens means same wise. So sapiens means knows. So the idea is that every single person on the whole world is the same species called Homo sapiens. And it's just kind of so. And then as with regards to, for example, horses, which would have been about the next most usual thing you'd find at this time, because of course before cars there was human power and there was horsepower for everything, or oxen or various donkeys, mules, beasts of burden, say, that humanism was also used as like, well, humans have souls, and then everything beneath does not have souls. And so humanism is at once like and lifting humans up. On the other hand, it's to be read that sometimes when you hear something being humanist, that it's also kind of like exclusive. So that it's inclusive and empowering and enabling, or it's kind of exclusive and trying to hold on to that instead, is for reading the word humanism. But here it's like so. Michel Eyquem, Eyquem, born in 1533 in the house of Montaigne, made for a part of Castillon in Périgord. His famille was enriched by Bordeaux down the commerce of wine exported to England, Angleterre, and fish. Son Bisseux, I think that's some relation or a relation in office. Ramon Eyquem had found the Terre Noble, Château de Montagne en Montagne, how one would say, again, the 18th century. So over the course of a couple hundred years. The father Montagne come to harangues, des harangues, I'm not familiar with that word, comme le portant Scaliger est un véritable seigneur, comme le père de Ronsard. Il participe aux guerres d'Italie, there were wars in Italy, and returned ébloui par cette civilisation aux les vestiges d'antiquité. He returned with many tidings and works from antiquity, and the innovations of the Renaissance associated for the celebrated beauty and the joy of life. His compatriots estimated enough, or gained esteem, to read, to make for Bordeaux. So for this region, that just affects reflect how this kind of knowledge and culture came into this region. An original education. N'ayant aucune connaissance de letters, without any reading about the témoignage de Montaigne, Pierre Eyquem came to his son, again better instructed in the Latin and the langue universal of the savants and the clerks, the savants and clerks, again here the same kinds of words, the sages, the clerics, and il entreprend de la lui faire apprendre à sortir de nourrice. He came to bring him this nutrition, like the mother tongue. So he kind of taught him in immersion. Dans le chapitre de l'institution des enfants, the education of youth, Montaigne rappelle avec un sourire attendri comment he starts with a happy comment about his dad who gave him a German précepteur allemand, chèrement gagé, qui avait pour mission de parler latin avec l'enfant, to speak Latin for him, for his tutor. to the exclusion of Francais, et de Périgordin, that would be another dialect of the region, which he himself was to learn later. So yeah, I'd forgotten that. I'd probably heard at some point some description of Montaigne or some various other people who their parents to give them an exercise in education raised and brought them up in like an entirely different world, and so that then when they arrived to the wider world, they were already versed in this perspective. I was thinking, and I can't really say it in regards to that would be like necessarily a very successful experiment, yet it's something to consider. His father gained to slow down this other stuff, so he prolonged the experiments and the experience, and he sent him to the Collège de Guion at Bordeaux. There he came to be reorganized by a Portuguese guy, André de Gouveia, well known by Pierre Equin, that they were able to fix his credentials, his brevet de naturalisation. Well, he was so arrived, le meilleur principal de France, au dire de Montaigne. So Montaigne is pretty big. His eminent professors, the humanist Buchanan, Guerente, Maret, who made these particular lessons, instructions, made the memories in this Essais of Montaigne great with a great memory. But wait, the best college and always a Géol or gold of the entrainment it was besides the people. Montaigne presented himself like a scholar and noble. Plus endormi qui turbulent. So in these times, unless he didn't interest himself with the books like the Metamorphoses de Ovid, l'Aeneid de Virgil, the Aeneid and the Metamorphoses, that he found all these together. Et puis Terence et Plaut, but he revealed itself to play in these front roles in the tragedy of Latinins de Buchanan, de Guerente, de Muret, Plutarch later. Loin de renier cette passion pour le théâtre, il la justifie. C'est un exercice que je ne m'élu, I would not put down, point aux jeunes enfants de maison, of the flower of youth. Et s'étant du discrédit au sang tenu, le comédien considéra que le théâtre est un excellent divertissement social. Si on n'apprit pas grand-chose au collège, du moins n'y gâta-t-il pas son judgment qui déjà était sûr. La carrière juridique. So later, Montaigne, or as regards to the story of Icam, went into the law. Au sortir de collège, Montaigne entreprend des études de droit vraisemblablement à Toulouse et à Paris. He consoled himself to be a native Périgord and Bordeaux, Périgord, bientôt. So going on, then this is he's got to deal with aspects of judgment, and so then this would get later until this next section says an homme libre. So later his learnings and his experiences then got him to build in his mental development and philosophical development to where he held up these as great ideals, these ideals of what's the golden rule and reciprocity, usually as the very foundation of ethics and morals, and then with regards to this reading into Montaigne, and so that would just be that later he's just an influential figure in the rhetoric accompanying these kinds of things, and then the rebirth of our spirit. in 1570. So this is kind of like the same time as, it's interesting, this is kind of like the same time as Cervantes and Quixote. If you haven't heard of Don Quixote de la Mancha, he's one of the greatest knight-errants of all the land. And he's also known as the Knight of the Sad Countenance and the Knight of the Lions. He's had many adventures, and he's well known, of course, also for his great page, Sancho Panza. At any rate, it was kind of written about the same time, whereas that was a comedy. It's a comedy humaine. It's a human comedy in a sense, vis-a-vis La Bête Humaine, the human beast, or the tragedy humaine. The comedy and tragedy are flip sides of the same coin. So that's what I want to read just a little bit today, was about Montaigne, and as he begins the Essays, and these principal editions of the Essays, and then into Montaigne to the reader. So he says, to the reader, here is a book, and then this section was already read. The conditions. If I was, and it talks about his worldview. This 1st of March, 1580 AD. Book 2 is more of these essays of Montaigne. Essais de Michel de Montaigne. Livre second, chapter 12. It's talking about Pythagoras, credited for the authority of the Pythagorean. And here that makes for a very rational and rulal account. So it's held up as one of the first sorts of matters of authority and reason. And so, of course, he references other such matters of considered authority and supremacy, and quote some Latin with regards to the exercise of reason and our humilitatis, that a conscientious logician is kind of like, it is so. I must believe my eyes. I can still be a skeptic and even a cynic, yet there is at least one honest man who ever lived. And so this gets in and talks about Plato, of course, so Platon. And so in this section, in the Livre Second, it appears he has a little bit more with regards to Leucippus and Democritus, or the water of Thales, or the infinity and natural of Anaximander. So Anaximander has infinity as in, and that was like way back. But of course, before that, then there's all the way back to like Ananta. Before Anaximander, there's Ananta, and where infinity is in. The infinity of Parmenides, or the one of Musée, or the water, or the fire of Apollodor, and the similar parts of Anaxagoras, or the discord and amity to Empedocles, or the fire of Heraclitus, or all these other opinions of this confusion infinite that have these sentences who made this good reasons for humans, why the certitude and the clairvoyance on all this that comes from it, coming together in the melee, that I would be of the opinion of Aristotle or Aristotle that on the subject of the principles of things that are natural, make for the principle of things that come in three pieces: matter, form, and privation. So the comprehension is the way I transfer that. And is it not humble, or is it too vain to make an inanity of itself, of the making of these things? And so here, this is a great little section in the Livre Second edition, Livre Second, chapitre 12, that Montaigne addresses the issues in technical philosophy and that are as of with regards to infinity. And so this is kind of where I'd be looking to see what kind of begins this. And then otherwise, as we've discussed here many times with regards to Epicure opposerait-il passer à Platon. Epicurus was opposed himself to Plato, with the grand apparence de l'homme en raison, and making it so it's like I'm a phenomenalist, and so it must be so demonstrable as to the senses, and so what is impossible to establish these things of the certain everlasting nature to the inconstant or the brief, the man. It doesn't make all these things specially, but what is it we have? So trying to read this from Montaigne is that he does have a great technical section, and so that's what I'll look to read some more. So then the other books kind of in this stack are, this is mentioning Cervantes. This is Miguel de Unamuno's Essays, Paradoxes, and Soliloquies. And so Cervantes and Quixote have over time made for many literary treatments, and I'm almost done reading Cervantes, and it's really great. And so it's happy, it's a pleasing thing, and it's a portrait of a man, and a man with an idea and a beliefs, and even who knows his limits when he's even beyond them. So Quixote is pretty great, and Panza is perfect. I knew a man of science, a true scientist, a specialist of positive and recognized merit in his field, who used to conceal many of his personal beliefs through the fear of being discredited and even scorned by the members of his profession. He was bearing the terrible burden of spiritual barrenness. So here, that's like, as part of a conscientious logician and mathematician, it's also is like that's kind of where it begins and ends, is the logic and mathematics. So, and then it's the same kind of goes for scientists. So besides it socially, that's not everything is merely on the merits of being a conscientious logician or mathematician. Is something here that this author addresses in this translation of this essay called Fanatical Skepticism, that it would well be good to read some more later. So this does have some reflections on the technical, and like these are the words we use. This philosophy of ours could with difficulty formulate itself in the second half of the 19th century, a period that was aphilosophical, positivist, technicist, given up to pure history and the natural sciences, a period essentially materialistic and pessimistic. And then he talks about the hero of Spanish thought, perhaps not an any philosopher who lived in flesh and bone, but an entity of fiction and of action, more real than all the philosophers non-Quixote. There is doubtless a philosophic Quixotism, but there is also a Quixotic philosophy. Was not perhaps the philosophy of the conquistadores, of the counter-reformers of Loyola, and above all the philosophy latent in the abstract but passionate thought of our mystics, in its essence none other than this? Yeah. So this is a great little book of Unamono, and it's warmly regarded and appreciated, and I kind of associate it with Borges in to an extent, and I'll look to read this more later. From the Empyrean series, Essays, Paradoxes, and Soliloquies, this sublunary editions. So many of these books that have gone out of copyright, and so a mark or publisher house like Sublunary Editions will make them available again, like so. I got this from the publisher, and I'm very happy I did. This book is a little bit more pessimistic, say, the hegemony of psychopathy. So, like when talking about what we would call this, the tragedy of the commons and the prisoner's dilemma and these kinds of things, is with regards to psychopathy, that's kind of part of the title of this thing, meaning that which is not the golden rule. Brons here just has this is actually pretty radical, and it's pretty much all not technical, but it does reflect on social issues. So this is pretty much kind of a radical work, but it does kind of indicate a reason why that there's definitely perceived strong rejection of oppression, say. And he mentions Karl Popper's The Spell of Plato. That might be an interesting work, The Spell of Plato. Because when it comes to something like Karl Popper and The Spell of Plato, or Karl Popper and the Open Society and Its Enemies, I kind of, when I first knew about Karl Popper, I'm like, great, he brought falsificationism into science. That's one thing we need, so that's good, and it's considered good. But then there's other stuff on the social side is like, well, I don't know about that because I have a strong mathematical Platonism and otherwise this stuff I'm not really sure. Oh, and then it also quotes Nozick, who's also read here, about bad times. Donald S. Lopez, The Scientific Buddha, His Short and Happy Life. Buddhaghosa claims that meditation is of many sorts and has various aspects, and that an attempt to define it would only lead to distraction. From the Path of Purification, Visuddhimagga, translated by Bhikkhu Unamono, Onalaska Press. So this Logos Brons is also something that it's from Brainstorm Books in Santa Barbara, California, and I haven't much read it yet. It's got some interesting things. And then it says for the mark that current developments in psychoanalysis, psychology, philosophy, and cognitive and neuroscience confirm the profound importance of expression and interpretation, informing the mind's reworkings of its intersubjective, historical, and planetary environments. So then not much other than that from this, but it's something else to look at a little later as part of the philosophy. So as part of reading this here, and what we're going to kind of arrive at for a few minutes is Derrida again, because this is still more about a geometry. It's kind of like a conscientious geometry in a sense, is the idea. Here's this Heidegger on Schelling on more about the freedoms. So after Montaigne, Schelling would have been kind of influenced by that. And then Heidegger would have come along at some point in time and made a great survey of it so it could be read in German. And then according to Heidegger's kind of way of his deductive accounts and his various ways that Heidegger makes for like the knockabout and turning things over as with regards to his studies of the things, as with regards to otherwise it's just kind of happens to be somebody who has got a lot of works together about these things and would have been exposed to many of these different things at once. So in his preface, Stendhal says, the study of Schelling's On Human Freedom is less known to English readers than Fichte and Hegel. Of Human Freedom, James Gutman also wrote the introduction. The reader can thus study the treatise as a whole. In general, the longer passages of Schelling quoted in this book are taken intact from Gutman's translation. This with regards to the Schelling. Schelling is the first thinker in the rationalist idealist tradition to grapple seriously with the problem of evil. So evil is just kind of considered exploitative. It's basically the very definition of psychopathy usually. I don't really know what it is, but it's also considered as a part of in some sense it's a defining thing. But here it's not. That's not really what I'm reading this for, because whether man has freedom and whether there's original sin and stuff is not so much part of this technical philosophy. And so here it's just and here it's that good friends are good, and watch out for the matters of trust, because you can take an average random person and trust them. You can trust them to throw you in a ditch for a penny. But besides that, you can still find something like the example of massive cooperation on the road, and you notice that everybody's got their hands on the wheel, and it goes just great. So there's definitely many modern examples of massive collaboration and cooperation that make for that many of the examples of reasonings to arrive at otherwise the opportunistic, and when the opportunistic is as well exploitative or not a win-win game, or not a zero-sum as a zero-sum game, that it just intends to make losers, that in an egalitarian setting that's double blind and you flip a coin and switch sides, then usually people would balance it out so that they wouldn't they would still be able to just carry on for their own good and these kinds of things. The only reason I picked up this book then after that is I glanced through it, and I hadn't really noticed this from the beginning, but he talks about logos at some point in time at the end. So let's see if I can find that briefly. He talks about the critique of pure reason, dogmatism, Descartes. Absolute. Thus Schelling says, Heidegger says, we are not different from dogmatism by asserting an absolute unity of thinking and being in the absolute, but rather in knowledge. And thus assert a being of the absolute in knowledge and of knowledge in the absolute. The absolute is in such knowing of the kind of intellectual intuition, and such knowing is in the absolute. Heidegger makes a lot of use of inflection and emphasis to arrive at expressing this point. And then it talks about usual phenomenological things that Heidegger's metaphysics are not considered to be cool like Hegel's. Intellectual intuition is the faculty, in general, of seeing the universal and the particular, the infinite and the finite, both unified in a living entity, unity, to see the plant in the plant, the organ in the organ, and in a word, the concept of the indifference, and the difference is possible only through intellectual intuition. So this is a great comment on the object sense. And I'm not sure if that's from Goethe's Phänomen, or over phenomenon. So Goethe is not just a novelist, he also wrote some theory, and is considered good. But sometimes it's considered that he wrote some tragedies, but they're okay. Goethe is held up as like almost as much as Cervantes is held up in the particular cultures. And I think he's just all right. Then he draws out Schelling, and he's like, well, let's entertain all these kinds of ideas, and we'll talk about Schelling. The being and nothing. And he's kind of talking around fundamental questions of metaphysics. And then as we come up to the hour or so here, I just want to make sure I give a little bit of time to Derrida on Husserl about axiomless geometry and Platonic geometry and scientific geometry all being the same thing. Schelling rightly says that Greek philosophy already went past dialectical adolescence with its first steps. This is our classical expositions of the supraclassical. So we got this intellectual intuition and the object sense, and then matters of intentionalism and identity. All decisive statements of all philosophy are dialectical, reading twice, dia to lectical, read. In a sense. And then he quotes Parmenides and Heraclitus. In this sense, Parmenides saying is dialectical, to gar auto noein estin to kai ene. Thinking and being are the same. So you can also reflect on that as like something Descartes said. Or Heraclitus is saying, ho theos himeri hufroni kimon theros polimos serene koros nemos. The god is day, night, winter, summer, war, peace, satiety, hunger. So here he reflects on duels. And so that's when here it's just said that Heraclitus introduces humanism, and then that Parmenides the dialectic. Dialectical in this sense is Plato's sentence: non-being exists to me on. This is like the ontology is on ontology. Or a Kant statement: the essence of experience is the essence of the object of experience. Or Fichte's statement: the I is the non-I. Here that's the apple in this context, where absent that apple, context remains. It is the same. And it's a little bit greater than a personal thing, because that's just totally mathematical universals. Here Heidegger comments: the I in Fichte must be understood as the living unity of beings and big being. I means that what everything is, what can still become an object for itself, whose own being can still be existent in this I. So sometimes you'll hear I, and it's just a first person personal pronoun. And then also it's kind of like there's I, and I, which is like there's the big I, and then like the universe, and then there's I, and then the little I is also a thing. That's also from other sort of traditions. And then in mathematics infinity, there's one I, and then there's infinity and infinitesimal, and so those make these constants about them, that one in infinitesimal or iota value and one infinity is a scalar infinity, are reciprocals, and their product equals one. So that's just reflects on perspective. Here that's also related to discussions of the Vedas as matters of perspective and projection. With regards to also those relate to the Atman Brahman sorts of thought experiments. These philosophical statements are dialectical. That means the essence of being is in itself finite. See, here I'll just disagree with that, because it's infinite first. So infinity is in, infinity starts the thing. And for this reason, where being is to be absolutely understood as infinite, as is the case in German idealism, the development of dialectic as a special method becomes necessary. Intellectual intuition in the sense of German idealism and the dialectic which it develops do not exclude each other, but require each other reciprocally. See, that's something I can agree with, at least. He quotes Schlegel. He says, Schlegel once said in the Athenaeum's Fragmenta, the Athenaeum is, across cultures, is like studies with these things, that, quote, a definition which is not funny is not worthwhile. This, unquote. He says, this is the turn of idealistic dialectic to the romantic. So at this point in time, Heidegger would have been confronting a bunch of different things at once. And then he gets into various questions, the concept of freedom, the ontological question as a fundamental question. And so then that's usually the ontological question is of metaphysics existing, or the supreme or the absolute. So that's given here is a given ungiven and perhaps given. There was some mention of logos, and so when I picked this up, I saw the word logos several times. It was really why I picked it up and kept it. But otherwise, there's plentiful stuff here that could be found in other works, but kind of goes with what Sal is saying. And I haven't really read anything yet, except as mentioned about what to disagree with, as that I might not be understanding much of the subtext, which is like the understandings and stuff that to rigorous conscientious logicians and mathematicians aren't necessarily things. This unity elevates itself from the ground of the separation of forces. Creating unity is the bond. The copulate is what binds ground and existence of the actual being. Schelling calls this band elevating itself to definiteness and yet remaining in the ground, the soul, in contradistinction to the spirit. Elevated from the ground, sundering itself, the soul continues to belong to it, and thus to be an individual sundering itself. So I would agree that would be the opposite of something like that. So I guess I would have to say I don't agree with that. The text gives the primordial motion of the thought. The interpretation extracted the essential factors for themselves, which are in motion in this motion. And then he reflects upon the natura naturans as natura naturata of Scotus Eriugena. So I'm a big, huge fan of Duns Scotus. And then Scotus Eriugena was another medieval philosopher from Ireland 100 or so years before. Well, all right, I didn't really find what I was looking for in this, but I got a lot out of Montaigne. So, and he talks about usual ideas of the metaphysics and being, that Heidegger as an anti-Plato is very much a Platonist. Well, coming up in the hour then, Edmund Husserl's Origin of Geometry, and with an introduction by Derrida. Then I turn in the middle of the long introduction and to find something about geometry. Neither pure diachrony nor pure synchrony make a history. The primitive genesis of it in itself, the principle of all principles, defined in ideas one. Source of authority. It's what it is. Well, gentle readers, thanks for following along today. I shall so hope that it wouldn't be entirely inscrutable, or otherwise as of my poor command of French or these other languages, each of which has their own truth and style and currents and subtext. That is with regards to the parts and wholes, or corpora and lib. This regards to the sublative and the illative. Then about formal and transcendental logic for Derrida and Husserl, that they're yet as well studies of the things. To a science in the form of infinite theory, of which Greek geometry supplied us. For some millennia, the example and sovereign model. Mathematics, the idea of the infinite, of infinite tasks, is like a Babylonian tower, or here a tower of rain. Although unfinished, it remains a task full of sense, opened onto the infinite. This infinity has for its correlate the new man of infinite ends. These are the two most apparently irreconcilable passages. The other one says, infinity is discovered, first in the form of the idealization of magnitudes, of measures, of numbers, figures, straight lines, poles, surfaces, etc. Now, without its being events, explicitly as hypothesis, ... And that's still part of the first one. And the second one says, of course, the ancients, guided by the Platonic doctrine of ideas, had empirical numbers with Euclidean geometry, resting on axiomatic fundamental concepts. But Euclidean geometry and ancient mathematics in general knows only finite tasks, a finitely closed a priori. Syllogistics belongs here also as an a priori. So that said, it's kind of like always been around, and it's always been kept up. Yet at the same time, as we know, from reading Aristotle, he's got prior and posterior, and infinity has always been in it, and it introduces itself every now and then when it was lost. Well, have a great day, gentle readers.